Welcome back to Working Faith, where we take a spiritual approach to career success. I'm your host, Jalen Isley, and today's topic is leadership. I'm so excited to introduce a dear friend of mine who happens to be an amazing business leader and someone who definitely defines success on his own terms, Dennis Crosby. So Dennis is on a mission to build companies like Richard Branson, achieve enlightenment like Buddha, and have a body like a professional athlete. Who doesn't love that? A personal development junkie who wants to share what he learns along his journey with whoever it will serve. So Dennis, welcome to the show. So glad to have you here.
Thank you. It was really weird hearing that out loud. But here we are.
Here we are. Here we are. You got to just own it, Dennis. You just got to roll with it. So
I've always been really terrible with the whole bio thing. Whenever somebody asks me for it, I'm like, what comes into my mind today?
You know, I've never quite taken the approach of what comes to my mind today, but I will tell you that like the bio is an interesting journey for me too. It's an interesting experience to kind of summarize yourself. So,
especially if you're not like a professional speaker or something like that, where you're just like, I'm just an average guy doing stuff that I enjoy doing. If I have bio like I'm a celebrity, like, okay, we'll figure it out.
Well, you know what? First of all, these days, everyone's a celebrity if they decide to be. And who doesn't want to just do whatever they want to do? Whatever, speaks to their soul or speaks to their heart. Like if that's not what a celebrity does, I don't know what is. So Dennis, you have officially reached celebrity status. Congratulations. If no one told you before, now you know, and now you can update your bio.
I knew you were going to be a gift in my life. I didn't know how, but now I know.
So today, once again, we're going to be talking about leadership and how spiritual principles can enhance someone's leadership and make that more impactful. So Dennis, before we jump into anything related to leadership, let's hear a little bit more about you. You know, this show is all about leveraging spiritual principles of our faith or our spirituality to positively impact the workplace and grow our careers. So let's start by talking about your own faith journey or spiritual journey. Please share a little bit more about your faith and how that has shaped who you are today.
Yeah, sure. I guess so we're talking about the faith version. I'll hit the high points of that one, where I wasn't really raised in a strong traditional church family, but the conversations about God was present. Right. So I went to church as a kid here and there, but it wasn't really my parents weren't like dogmatic about me being part of church or anything like that. But it was an ever present thing in the family. And for probably teenage years to late 20s, I was basically agnostic, I would say. Agnostic, borderline in and out, dabbling with atheism. So kind of flowing back between like, maybe there's something there, but I don't know what, and I don't think there's anything. And part of that was, I think, the rebelliousness of not liking to be forced to do things or feeling like wanting to be controlled. And that was definitely my experience of religion growing up. It was like very much a control play. So that carried me through most of my formative years. And then I got super burned out with work around the age of 30. And I'd been doing entrepreneurship for about 10 years at that point. And it was just, I was tired of being stressed out all the time. And I went through this really deep decompression phase. And I then broke up with my girlfriend at that time. It was around the same time. And I was left really not knowing who I was in those moments, who I was, what I wanted, what I liked, all those things. I completely lost myself in that relationship. And a buddy of mine handed me a book during that time. It was a Michael Singer book. He has two that I read, Surrender Experiment and this other one. But I read through that, and that was kind of my first reintroduction into spirituality.
The Untethered Soul?
Untethered Soul. Thank you. Exactly.
Gotcha.
I appreciate it. And when that hit me, I was like, okay, maybe there's something to the spirituality thing. Before that, most of my personal development had been really around the context of business and relationships. I had never really started looking seriously into spirituality. So that opened my eyes, which then put me down a Taoist path. And I got really into Taoism for a while.
Hmm.
And Taoism is incredibly supportive for decompressing from overachieving and stress because it's very much flowy. Like, just it's called the middle path. So you're not
Hmm.
aiming for too high, you're not doing too lows, you're just seeking the middle and just allowing it to flow. You're not trying to force things to happen. You're not being like committed to a vision or anything like that. You're just flowing. At least that was my understanding of it back then. It's evolved since then. So it was very supportive for there. I was reading the Tao Te Ching daily, journaling on it daily for months. And from there, I decided to go on a little walkabout around the world. I was gone for about 6 months. And during that time, I read and listened to Conversations with God. Are you familiar with that one? I think
I
Neil Diamond
am.
Walsh.
Yep.
Yeah.
All
So that was
three
my,
very long books.
the funny thing, I listened to it a lot, like a lot for the better part of a year. And I have not gotten through more than 25% of the first book.
You know
And
what's funny? We're going to get back to this in just a moment. So I
so,
have all three books. I've listened. I listened to them. I've read them, physically read them as
mm,
well. And man, I can't finish the last one. I don't know why.
really,
Yeah, but it's still
like,
really good. Like what I have read is really amazing.
yeah. And you know what happened to me? Like, I would start reading the book and I would get I was mainly listening to the audiobook. So I would get maybe an hour into it and realize that like every word was impacting me so heavily. I was
Hmm.
like, I have to go back and re-listen.
Yeah,
So I
same.
would start over. Then I would go through it again and I might get a little bit further, restart it all over again. And so I never made it past 25% of the first book. And then after a while, I was like, I kind of got this intuitive sense of just, I think that was all I was meant to get from this,
Mm,
at least in this
mm,
season of my life. Because I
yeah.
never felt called to go further once I felt like I really had integrated those lessons. Like past that, it felt no desire to go any further.
Interesting.
So, yeah, so that was and the reason why I even bring that up is because that was my reintroduction to a God concept.
Hmm.
Right before that, it was more spirituality, but not necessarily a deity to focus on. So that was my reintroduction to God. And I had so much like baggage I had to let go of around that. That probably took another year or two just to be comfortable with the idea of accepting a God. And from there, it's just been kind of infusing and integrating at deeper and deeper levels. And now I've actually started within maybe the last year or so looking at how to integrate that into my process of building businesses and what it looks like from a day-to-day basis and how do I lean on faith to guide what I work on, how I show up, my decision making criteria for the business, how I deal with my team members, and really looking at, okay, what does it look like in practice day to day on both the macro and the micro?
I think it's so interesting. So you brought up so many different things that I want to jump into, but I've got to choose. I've got to prioritize here. So the first thing that really stood out to me was when you said that was all I was meant to read with the book. 25% into Conversations with God, you stopped. You let your spirit, body, mind, what have you, let you know, okay, this is what you need for this time. And I think that so many people, especially spiritually or faith based individuals, get so overwhelmed with trying to get something right or trying to fully embody a certain concept or faith
Mm-hmm.
or religion or it's kind of like you're the student in the first row trying to get that A. And you could have continued reading the book just for the sake of doing that, but
Yeah.
you decided to focus on what you needed for that time. And I think that's so profound. And if I think it's something that a lot of us can take away, even in our professional lives. What do I need for this moment? Like, I don't have to indulge in this rat race, or I don't have to indulge in, trying to accomplish X, Y, and Z in a certain amount of time or things like that. I can just stay right here in this moment and let my spirit tell me exactly or show me and give me exactly what I need for this time. Does that ring
Mhm.
true to you? How I just
Yeah. Yeah, I think especially that last piece is letting your spirit tell you.
hmm
I call it intuition, but to
same.
me it's
Yep.
right. And I think the more there's been a deeper and deeper belief manifesting inside of me that there is a part of me that knows all the answers.
Mm,
Whether you connect that piece to being God or just the part that connects with God or what, however you define that, it's I become aware there's a part of me that knows exactly what I need to do next for where I'm ultimately going in my life. Don't know how it
interesting.
knows, but I know it knows.
Hmm.
And that's what I consider my intuition, highest self. Some people
Yep.
refer to it as well. And by the more I lean into that, it seems like the less resistance I feel along my journey. Not to say that my journey becomes easier because it can still be very hard, but I
hmm
feel less resistance when taking the next step.
That makes a lot of sense. Because that resistance can cause just so much. I feel like the resistance is the reason people feel so stressed or overwhelmed sometimes
I think
because they're experiencing that.
I think everything we talk about in terms of what we're trying to avoid, overcome is synonymous with resistance.
Hmm,
Like you
interesting.
can swap all of it out with resistance. If you want to go meta and take it one level deeper, you can call it fear. Like resistance is just fear.
Very true. Very true. Very true. So there was another thing that you mentioned in terms of the fact that like now you are starting to consciously incorporate your faith or your spiritual beliefs into your business and the decisions that you're making and even the businesses that you decide to pursue or move forward with. So talk to me a little bit about how your professional values have developed over time based on your spiritual beliefs.
Yeah, so this has been a little newer, probably within I don't know, the last 6 months or so, is where this has been manifesting more into my life. And there's also a good book I recommend called Love Does. Have you
Hmm,
heard of it?
I
Um,
haven't.
Bob Geoff, Goff, something like that. And it's really talking about love in action,
Hmm,
which is, I would say, what most religious practices are really talking about: love, being love in action. And for me, how my mind makes sense of it and how I filter that to the point where I can actually act on it is asking myself the question, what would love do?
hmm,
And really working on embodying my heart into my actions. So that it manifests itself in a lot of different ways. For example, we were working on a collaboration project in my business where we were looking at course creators to come on and allow us to sell their courses that they've already created. And we were doing a lot of outreach. We were talking. And originally, the plan was in my mind, I wanted to do about a 30-70 split, which is 30% to them, 70% to us, because we were doing all the marketing, sales, etc. It was to our customer base. I hopped on the first call with one of them and everything was going smooth. Then he asked what the percentage split would be. I said 30-70. And you could tell he like hesitated for a moment and it just didn't feel like I felt the resistance going back to that with it.
hmm,
And he was internally processing. He was like, okay, I guess that's fine. And I could have left it at that, but I noticed that there was something off there. And it was important for me for this to be a true win-win situation. I asked him what it was. He's like, it feels a little low. I said, what did he want? He's like, well, something like 50-50 would be nice. But he was also okay accepting it. And that moment, not on that call, I told him I'd circle back with him. But I got to decide or sit back and think, what do I really want? Who I want to be in this situation? Because I was pretty confident I could sell 30% probably to all these people and be okay and pocket an extra 20% for my business, who was financially struggling at that time. Right. But then I really sat back and I was like, what would love do? Like, what's my heart want? This is not the person who's making a decision based out of fear. and is concerned for the future of the company, but who is coming from a place of, I want everybody to win and I just want prosperity for all type of situation. And from that moment, I was like, it has to be 50-50. Like, it just has to. That's what's going to feel best. So that's an example of, in practice, how it shows up. A very small example, but I think that holds. Like, you can use that as a microcosm for everything.
Yeah, I think that a few things that you said there, but probably the most important thing that resonates with me is you were able to identify when the fear or the resistance was coming up, not just for that person, but for yourself as well, because you were thinking about the fact that, okay, my company's already struggling financially. I know that I have the capacity, the competency to sell this at whatever number I think is best. And you were able to pause long enough to think about what love looks like in this situation, and also have the trust to know that there's enough for everyone. There's a way for my company to win. There's a way for this person or their company to win and get what they need. And I'm going to trust love to be able to satisfy everyone's needs and desires in this particular instance. I think that's amazing.
Yeah. And just to conclude that story, towards the end of this process, what we've been noticing is people are excited to work with us and are offering us more opportunities because they feel good about the partnership collaboration. Maybe that would happen if we kept it at the 30-70. I don't know, but my gut tells me no, at least not to the magnitude that we're seeing.
Interesting. Yeah. And that takes a different approach and a different perspective, to what we've historically seen in companies sometimes. We've historically seen companies, just kind of think about what's going to maximize the most profits for the company or for an individual. And we're just going to go from there. We're not going to think about or take anyone else into consideration. It's not our responsibility to take someone else's interest in consideration. It's their responsibility to fight for that. And so instead of fighting, you chose love. And now there, are multiple opportunities for further collaboration and growth for everyone's business.
Yeah, I would say people like doing business with people they like. And
Very
people
true.
like people who give them a good deal.
Very true.
Like, it's hard to say, I like this guy who gave me less than what I think I deserved.
Exactly.
I mean, it's on a purely pragmatic standpoint.
Yeah, and people don't always think about love being a pragmatic approach to things. But everyone wants to be treated like a human being. Everyone wants to feel valued and worthy and respected for what they bring to the table, or they don't want to work with you. If you don't respect what someone's bringing to the table, then that's probably not someone you should be working with anyway. So, I think that makes so much sense. Tell me a little bit more about leadership specifically. So you talked about, this business opportunity that you were able to leverage through love, but you as a business leader, and how you show up for your team, what are some of the spiritual principles that you use to guide your behavior in that regard?
Yeah, I would actually say that's probably where it gets more challenging. And it's not so much in the being there to support others. I think most people generally want to give to others. Right. And I imagine everybody listening to this podcast is probably in that category of they enjoy and they see the value of giving to others. Where I've found it being more challenging is, how do I do the hard things from a place of love, faith, abundance, trust, belief? Like, how do I downsize a company? How do I cut expenses? Right? Like, that's when it became for me a much more difficult integration. And I would say love in action doesn't always mean being what society would consider nice. Right? It's always kind, but it's not always presents as nice. It's not always present as touchy-feely, lovey, like, oh, yeah, I like what he's doing. Doesn't mean you're going to be liked. Just acting for love does not mean you're going to be liked. And that has been a much more challenging way of test of how deeply I'm embodying these principles.
Interesting. How do you feel like you're growing with that? Like, do you feel like you were able to do some of those things through love?
Yeah, for sure. It's a hit or miss. It's by no means am I perfect with it. And but I'm better than I was before, which is all that really matters.
How do you test, like, how do you gauge, if you're let's use downsizing as an example.
Mm.
How would you gauge whether or not you're operating from a place of love as a leader or some other foundation?
Fear, right, would be the
Okay.
other. You were pretty much either operating from two frame of references, love or fear, from my
Yep.
belief set.
Okay.
So I would say it's harder for me to judge in real time, but it's really easy for me to tell post.
Hmm.
Like, where was
Okay.
that coming from? So it's a little hard to course correct in the moment, a lot easier to reflect upon. And then you can always go make up for it. Yeah, always, but a lot of times you can go back up and make up for it. And then being in situations, because most, especially in professional business, etc., you're really running into the same situations over and over.
Mm-hmm.
I read a book or something that said there might be 50 problems in a business and everything else just rehashing those same problems. So that's really helpful because you get multiple swings of the bat. Right? So what downsizing looked like 4 years ago for me versus what it looked like a year ago, very different. I'm a very different person. Same problem, but I got to handle it in a very different way based on that experience.
I see.
So to more directly answer your question, if I take the time, like it's not an emergency fire that's being brought to me, it's something that I have time to sit with before I go take action, usually through some contemplative practice, some practice of being with myself and checking in, getting outside of being trigger and reaction, whatever that looks like in that moment, and just saying, like, hey, simple question, what would love do? How would love handle this?
Mm-hmm.
And frequently it's not try to keep everybody and figure it out, which is what the people pleaser part of me would love to do. But it's more of, okay, here is how it can go about. So in this most recent time that happened, I told everybody my goal is to not have to lay off anyone. And I'm going to have to offer you new arrangements, whether that be diminished hours or new roles or whatever. I'm going to have to offer you all different options. You can choose to take it and stay, or you can choose to not take it and leave. That's okay. No love lost. But I am going to at least do my best to find a way where everybody who wants to stay has a way to stay here.
Hmm.
And that's what it looked like in that
Yep.
moment.
Makes sense. Makes sense. I appreciate the fact that you mentioned taking some time with yourself, especially when you have the time. Sometimes you don't always have that luxury. And I think that daily practice of behaviors allows you to still respond in love, even when you don't have the luxury of time. But when you do have that luxury, making a point to kind of sit with yourself and lean into your intuition or your spirit or your instinct, whatever that foundation is really beneficial. So that actually leads me to my next question. This will be my last one for you. Um, over the years, we've seen a heightened awareness around mental health and holistic wellness. And I certainly consider spirituality to be a core part of someone's wellness. So when you take that time to sit with yourself or even in some of your daily practices, is there anything that you can share with our audience, specific practices that you use to maintain your spiritual well-being?
Yeah, before I answer that, let me close the loop on that practice comment because I do really am a strong believer in having your daily practices that elevates your baseline.
Hmm.
Because what I've seen, experienced in myself, and heard from others is in those moments of reaction and being triggered or whatnot, we fall to our lowest point of training. So you look
Hmm.
at practice as training, we don't rise to the occasion historically. we drop to our lowest level of training or to wherever our training is at. Right? So by having those daily practices, like where you drop in those times where it's the fire emergency becomes higher and higher and higher and higher. So you can be more and more and more of yourself, of your faith-based love self during those times. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you. That was very powerful, very helpful to so many.
Yeah, absolutely. Then my daily practices, it shifts a lot based on whatever I am working on within my inner world at that time. I would say the consistent pieces of it is I carve time out in the morning, every morning, to be able to do whatever it is I'm going to do. It's usually involving some type of closed-eyed something, whether it be meditation, whether it be an inner therapy, something. I will usually work with some kind of practitioner who's helping me work on the more challenging areas or my blind spots or something along those lines. And then everything else is just whatever. If I might be listening to a book or reading poems or journaling or just whatever is calling out to my soul to help me along my journey next.
Makes sense. So closed eye meditation or therapy, support from a practitioner, which I think is so important. You know, it's okay for people to get help where they need it. You don't have to do this alone. And then anything else that kind of speaks to your inner man at that particular season of your life
like
to enhance that daily practice. I think that's great. And it's also very realistic to know that you don't have to do the same thing again and again and again. There are so many paths to enhancing and strengthening your spiritual well-being so that you're ready, to show up in this world.
I almost never have my mornings look the same from day to day. It's very rare. And I've gone through pretty much any practice you can think of. People say for daily, I've done it for a season, whether it be journaling, walking, cold plunges, meditating, manifestation stuff. You name it. I probably have tested it out and I just rotate through it. I need that fluidity and flexibility.
And you learn so much about yourself that way, when you kind of rotate through different things or introduce new methods. There's never been a time when I've done something new and I haven't learned something or relearned something about myself. So I think that's valid, very, very valuable advice here. All right. Well, Dennis, it has been such a great time catching up with you today. And as always, you drop so many amazing gems. And what I enjoy the most about my conversations with you is that you're always sharing something that someone could practically use. It's not so ethereal or ethereal. How do you say that word? I can't even think. But it's relatable and actionable. So that's always great. Thank you so much for sharing with us today. Is there, just final thoughts, any action item or tactic that someone could intentionally use as they gear up for the upcoming work week?
I mean, the goal here is really to integrate faith into your day-to-day, into your profession. I think one of the most powerful questions that we ask is, what would love do? Or your version of that. Love, Jesus, Buddha, universe, whoever you believe is in the highest embodiment of what you want to be and you're striving for. Just ask, what would they do?
Makes sense. You keep it simple and greatness comes as a result of that. So, yeah. All right. Thanks for sharing with us today. And thank you all for listening to Working Faith. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. All the show notes, information about our guests, and link to submit your career questions can actually be found on the website, workingfaith.com. Remember to subscribe, rate, and share the show with others. And I'd love to hear your comments. So you can engage directly with me in the Working Faith group on LinkedIn. And once again, thanks for listening. We'll be back next week with more tips on how you can take a spiritual approach to your career success and work your faith. Good day.